A black nurse was fired for saving lives. 48 hours later, she's welcomed into a billionaire's mansion. Imagine you're walking home from your last shift, 5 years of your life wiped out in a single sentence. One moment you're a lifesaver, the next you're unemployed and drowning in bills. Then, in the middle of rush hour chaos, you see a man collapse, his pulse fading. And you're the only one who can save him. You drop to your knees, fingers on his neck, heart pounding as you count compressions against the screech of traffic. When he gasps back to life, it feels like a miracle, and yet it's only the beginning of a journey that will turn everything upside down. If you've ever been betrayed by the very system meant to protect you, make sure you're part of this fight. Hit subscribe now and tap the notification bell to join Aisha's battle for justice. Like if you believe the underdog deserves a voice, and comment below with your own story of standing up when no one else would. Your voice matters. Aisha Thompson learned early that healing isn't just a job, it's a calling. Growing up in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, she watched her grandmother tend neighbors without asking a cent. Now at 29, Aisha races through St. Mary's Emergency, her navy scrubs streaked with fast food grease and exhaustion. Every night she trades lullabies for beeping monitors comforting patients whose families can't afford private care. Her hands move with practiced precision, checking IV lines, wiping fevered brows, whispering reassurances to strangers who clutch her wrist like a lifeline. This is 2025, 6 months after the state slashed healthcare budgets. Hallways that once echoed hope now reek of disinfectant and desperation. Aisha's colleagues, most of them Black, Latinx, and white, are down to half staff. Overtime shifts stretch to 14 hours. In the break room, she hears the hushed conversations. Layoffs loom next week. Benefits vanish. Morale crumbles. Administrators call it restructuring. For Aisha, it feels like betrayal. Outside the hospital, Little Rock churns with unease. New construction glistens downtown, while half the city struggles to refill prescriptions. At the corner pharmacy, retirees argue that medicine costs more than rent. Local news reports spotlight rising mortality among low-income residents. Every statistic is a human face, a mother in tears, a child in pain. Aisha's own rent triples in 3 years, her savings evaporate, but she never complains. Saving lives offers its own reward until the email hits her inbox. At dawn, she opens the message, effective immediately, your position is terminated. No warning, no severance. 5 years of duty erased in one cold click. Aisha's vision blurs. She blinks back tears as her heartbeat thunders. She drags herself through Manhattan Avenue toward home, each step heavier than the last. In her pocket, an eviction notice stamped due in 7 days. In her mind, the faces she couldn't save, and the promise she made to her grandmother. Then, among the commuter chaos, she hears a thud. She freezes. On the sidewalk lies Marcus Lee, a college student with a full scholarship, the son of a local pharmacist. His skin is pale as chalk, his fingers twitching on the pavement. No one moves. Cars honk. Pedestrians glance away. But Aisha doesn't think. She drops her bag, unlaces her feet from vinyl shoes, and kneels beside him. She doesn't ask permission. She doesn't check for ID. She leans close, pressing her fingertips to his carotid artery, locating the faintest tremor of life. Her mind narrows, airway clear. Breathing absent. Pulse too weak. Training kicks in. 1, 2, 3. Chest compressions echo against the concrete. Her arms shake from fatigue and adrenaline. In that moment, there is no past, no eviction, no broken promises, only the rhythm of survival. Around her, the world blurs into motion, a dropped coffee cup, the screech of a passing bus, an onlooker's scream. Then a gasp, Marcus's chest heaves, and air floods his lungs. Relief ripples through the crowd like a wave. Aisha exhales, her knees aching, tears mingling with sweat. She straightens, wipes her hands on her scrubs, and steps back. She doesn't wait for applause or paramedics. With her heart still pounding, she stands up and vanishes into the crowd, uncertain of tomorrow, but certain this is who she was born to be. Aisha's world trembled the moment she stepped out of that cafe. The polished marble walls and amber light couldn't soften the weight of James Whitaker's words. "My father wants to meet you." Her fingers closed around the black card he slid across the table. No logo, no name, just a promise of something she couldn't yet name. She spent the subway ride home running through scenarios. A personal medical advisor triple salary live in the guest house on a billionaire's estate. Every syllable felt too extravagant, like a trap disguised as a reward. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. She pictured her empty bank account, the eviction notice, the phone calls she had ignored for weeks. And yet she couldn't stop thinking about Marcus Lee, the grateful gasp that had rippled through that crowd. That night, sleep eluded her. She stared at the ceiling, the black card on her nightstand glowing in the moonlight. When the sun finally rose, she found herself standing again in front of the gleaming tower of Whitaker Pharmaceuticals. This time she wasn't alone. Her walking boots echoed off the lobby's tile as she followed the receptionist's cool instructions to the private elevator. The doors slid open on a panoramic view of Little Rock's skyline. Colin Whitaker sat behind a desk of dark oak, his white hair and tailored suit signaling power. His gaze was appraising, cold as polished steel. Aisha swallowed, heart rocketing. "Miss Thompson," he said, voice deep enough to rattle glass. "Thank you for saving my son. But I'm not here to pay you back. I'm here to invite you in." She watched the corner of his mouth twitch. Behind her, James leaned against the window. A single spotlight of sun sliced across the thousands of lives affected by Whitaker's latest price hike, 200% increases on life-saving drugs for heart failure insulin cancer treatments. Aisha remembered watching patients in her ER clutch their empty wallets, tears in their eyes begging for alternatives. Colin stood and offered his hand. "You have integrity, Miss Thompson. You do what you must without question." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I need someone like you in my inner circle, someone who understands what it means to keep people alive when the world would rather count profits." Her stomach twisted. He spoke of profits as if they were air. "Why me?" she asked. Her voice sounded small, but her shoulders squared. "Because you saw a life slipping away and acted. Most would have hesitated." He paused. "And because you know what it feels like to be thrown aside." He tapped a touch screen embedded in the desk. Instantly, a holographic display flickered to life. Red graphs spiraling upward, labeled quarterly revenue, drug markups, investor returns. Next to them, a smaller panel glowed amber community impact dashboard, lives lost 3452. Aisha's breath caught. Her ears throbbed with every calculated number. "You're profiting while people die," she said, voice rising. The light trembled across Colin's face. He leaned in, fingers steepled. "We invest in research, Miss Thompson. We save lives on a scale you can't imagine. And yes, margins must be healthy." He tapped another icon, a photo of a sleek orphanage in Vietnam, bearing the Whitaker crest. "We also give back global clinics, scholarship funds, emergency relief." Her vision tunneled. She remembered the faces of the uninsured back-home elderly men coughing in parking lots, mothers selling jewelry to afford insulin. She thought of Marcus, the son of the local pharmacist spared by her hands. How many others had she seen slip away? Behind her, James cleared his throat. "My father's generosity is genuine, but he needs someone with your moral compass to guide him, to make sure our choices don't cross ethical lines." His gaze was earnest. Aisha's heart hammered. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. Part of her screamed to walk away to keep her hands clean. Yet an even louder part surged with anger. Anger at the system that treated healthcare like a commodity. Anger at administrators who slashed budgets without blinking. Anger at herself for feeling lost and powerless. When she opened her eyes, determination glinted in them. "I'll take the job," she said quietly. Colin's lips curved into a small, approving smile. "Excellent. You'll start Monday. Welcome to Whitaker Enterprises." The next week blurred into a whirlwind. Aisha traded her scrubs for a white coat embroidered with the Whitaker crest. Her first assignment: review the pricing committee's proposal for next quarter. She entered a boardroom where 10 executives in bespoke suits sat waiting, coffee cups steaming beside stacks of legal pads. Aisha's pulse throbbed, her palms slick. She cleared her throat. "Good morning. I'd like to discuss the proposed 200% increase on Cardiolex." She opened her laptop and pulled up patient testimonials: a retired schoolteacher forced to choose between medication and groceries, a single father skipping doses to save money, a young man dying of heart failure. The room grew still. The CFO, a sharp-eyed man named Caldwell, tapped his pen. "Dr. Thompson, with respect, if we don't adjust margins, our R&D pipeline stalls. Without profits, there are no new drugs." She felt the familiar knot in her chest, the same panic she'd felt when the layoff email pinged. But this time she stood taller. "I've reviewed our R&D budget. There's a $150 million surplus earmarked for administrative costs. Redirecting just a fraction could fund Cardiolex production at cost, providing immediate relief to patients in need." Murmurs rippled around the table. The CEO himself leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "And you propose we forgo revenue? I propose we honor the trust patients place in us every time they open their wallets." Her voice rang steady. Silence. Then Caldwell cleared his throat. "We'll consider it." But that evening, as she rode the elevator down, her phone buzzed a news alert. Whistleblower allegations. Rock Whitaker Pharmaceuticals. Insiders claim board ignored safety data to boost profits. Aisha's stomach dropped. She looked at her reflection in the elevator's chrome walls: white coat, anxious eyes, lips pressed tight. That weekend she spent hours poring over internal reports and safety audits she'd found on the company intranet. The deeper she dug, the darker it became: manipulated clinical trial data, side effect reports buried in legal footnotes, emails demanding expedite approvals at any cost. Each document felt like a betrayal, not just of patients, but of every nurse, doctor, and caregiver who trusted Whitaker's name. Her phone glowed with a single incoming call: unknown. She hesitated, thumb hovering, then answered, steeling herself. "Aisha, it's James." His voice was low, urgent. "Be careful. Some people don't want these emails seen." She swallowed. "You knew I did. I found out my father's been covering for the board. If this leaks, the fallout could be catastrophic. For you and me." Aisha's breath caught. She pictured paramedics ripping off her coat as liability patients refusing her help, the sheriff's office knocking at her door. She gripped the desk, knuckles white. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, but fierce. "Then I know exactly what I have to do." On Monday morning, the boardroom lights flickered as she entered, a stack of printed emails in her hand. Executives shifted uneasily. Even Colin's usual composure wavered. She set the papers on the conference table. "This is a timeline of internal memos showing we suppressed data on Cardiolex's lethal side effects. This is the Finance Committee's secret spreadsheet projecting profit gains from inflated pricing. And this," she held up a final document, "is a letter from the FDA demanding immediate disclosure to protect patient safety." A collective gasp rose. Caldwell's face went ashen. Colin's jaw tightened. "For too long," Aisha continued, "we've hidden behind profit statements while people die in parking lots. I stand here not just as your advisor, but as the voice of every patient who trusted your name." She pressed a button on her remote. The screen behind her glowed with side-by-side comparisons, testimonial videos of suffering patients juxtaposed with Whitaker's glossy ads. Executives fidgeted. James looked at his father, shame and fear flickering in his eyes. Colin rose, face unreadable. Aisha's heart pounded, but her voice rang clear. "It's time to choose profits or people." A hush descended, the only sound the hum of the air conditioning vents. In that moment, every eye was on her, the fired nurse who returned as a reckoning. And as the tension peaked, she knew the war had just begun. Aisha could feel the weight of every life she'd saved, and every life she'd lost, pressing on her chest as she stepped out of that gleaming boardroom. The door clicked shut behind her, and in that instant, she made a choice. She would stop being a pawn in Colin Whitaker's game. She would become the reckoning. She returned to her small apartment, peeling off the crisp white coat and sinking onto the edge of her bed. The glow of her laptop illuminated stacks of eviction notices and unpaid medical bills. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as blood pounded in her temples. Every scrub-stained fingertip seemed to burn. She opened a secure chat with Marcus Lee, the young man she rescued, now her unlikely ally. "I need everything you've got on Whitaker's internal drives," she typed. Within minutes, a folder appeared. Pricing memos, legal briefs, safety audits buried under layers of confidential stamps. First, she mapped the players Colin James Caldwell, the CFO, and Dr. Nguyen. In regulatory affairs, their emails travel itineraries, boardroom schedules. She printed screenshots of price hike approvals, highlighting the line where Marcus's mother begged for just half doses. She tapped her pen sharply against the data, igniting a fury that turned grief into purpose. Next, she crafted her strategy. She couldn't simply go public. Whitaker had layers of legal firewalls and PR spin doctors ready to bury any scandal. Instead, she would expose the truth where it burned brightest inside the company's own sanctum. She reserved a slot at the upcoming quarterly board meeting under the guise of clinical review, using credentials she'd earned with blood and sweat. Then she hacked together a USB drive loaded with the damning evidence. Every detail mattered. She wore a discreet lapel mic, set her phone to live stream in case they pulled power. She drafted a short, searing statement. No jargon, just human faces and names: Ms. Ramirez, Mr. Alvarez, little Sarah Nguyen. She rehearsed her tone until anger and clarity fused into one unwavering voice. On the morning of the meeting, the elevator ride up to the boardroom felt like a descent into a lion's den. Her heart ratcheted with each floor. The moment the doors opened, she steeled herself, cool shoulders, direct gaze. Executives in tailored suits turned to greet her, nodding politely as she passed. She kept her posture, straight fingers wrapped around the USB like a lifeline. The meeting began with Colin's usual charm offensive, a slideshow of glossy clinics and smiling surgeons. She let it play out, watching eyes glaze over as profit margins were touted as moral victories. Then came the pricing discussion. As Caldwell droned on about sustainable growth, Aisha raised her hand, voice steady but sharp. "I have an urgent clinical update." Silence slammed the room. She clicked the USB into the wall port. The screen flickered from pie charts to patient photos, a hospice ward in disarray, children pleading for insulin, elderly men hunched in parking lots. She let the images linger. Sobs rippled through the audience. Then she played the audio, a leaked voicemail from Colin himself, instructing Dr. Nguyen to delay side effect reporting for maximum Q3 profit. Every word dripped with cold calculation. Gasps filled the air. Colin's composure cracked. "This is," he began, voice low. But Aisha cut him off. "No more spin. These are real people, patients who trusted Whitaker's name. You gambled with their lives for stock options." Her pulse echoed in her ears as she returned to her seat, eyes locked on his. Behind her, a quietly beeping smartphone broadcast the entire exchange live to hundreds of patient advocacy groups and journalists who had pre-subscribed to her feed. The boardroom doors burst open. Security moved in, but not before Aisha clicked end stream and swept her laptop into her tote. She strode past stunned faces, adrenaline scorching her nerves. She anticipated retaliation, termination, lawsuits, threats. But as she emerged into the lobby, she didn't hesitate. She passed the surprised receptionist and headed straight for the main doors. Marcus was waiting outside, breathless, handing her a to-go coffee. He grinned, eyes bright with excitement and fear. "You did it," he whispered. Aisha sipped the bitter brew, feeling the first taste of triumph. "It's not over," she replied. "We have to make sure they change." Her phone chimed with messages, news outlets calling for comment, patient groups rallying behind her legal teams, drafting class action suits. In that moment, every ounce of exhaustion vanished. She felt the electricity of justice coursing through her veins, stronger than any IV line she'd ever inserted. That night, as she lay in bed, the black card from James Whittaker lay untouched on her dresser. She closed her eyes, knowing that tomorrow she would begin the real work rebuilding trust, redefining healthcare, and honoring every single person who had ever depended on her courage. Because for Aisha, Thompson revenge wasn't just a moment of vindication, it was the start of a revolution. The morning after Aisha's explosive boardroom standoff, she wakes before dawn. Her phone buzzes with alerts, tweets, breaking news banners, direct messages from patient advocacy groups pledging support. She refuses to check them yet. Instead, she moves quietly, pulling on black cargo pants and a leather jacket. Today is about action, not reaction. By 6:00 a.m., she's at the downtown data center where Whittaker Pharmaceuticals hosts its cloud servers. The building's reflective windows gleam in first light. She slips inside under the pretense of a scheduled systems audit credentials tucked into her badge from last week's emergency review. Security scans her ID, glances at the Dr. Thompson nameplate, and waves her through. She navigates narrow hallways lined with humming racks of servers. Each step echoes like a heartbeat. Reaching the secured terminal room, she scans the access badge, enters the PIN she memorized from Marcus's cache, and the door opens with a quiet whoosh. Inside, she plugs in her modified USB, a slim drive loaded with 2 files, pricing scandal.zip and safety alerts. Zip. The screens light up as she types commands into the terminal, fingers flying. Within seconds, torrents of data begin uploading to 3 destinations: a secure drop in the Guardian's investigative newsroom, the FDA's whistleblower portal, and an encrypted channel for the U.S. Senate Health Committee. She watches file transfer bars inch toward completion. At 6:14, transfer complete flashes in crimson. She yanks the drive free and pockets it, heart racing. She knows they'll trace this breach back to her, but by then the evidence will be public. Next, she moves to the PR floor. Hallways smell of fresh paint and brand new carpet. A line of PR specialists chat over coffee, unaware of the storm about to hit. Aisha walks straight to the receptionist desk and asks for Mr. Caldwell's conference room. The assistant taps on her screen. "He's in a meeting, Dr. Thompson," she replies. Without missing a beat, Aisha nods. "Then please tell him I need an urgent 5-minute briefing on public communications." The assistant hesitates, then calls up. A moment later, she nods at Aisha. "Follow me." Inside Caldwell's glass office, she finds the CFO's briefing folder open on the desk slides, penciled with damage control and stakeholder outreach. She steps forward, lays the USB drive gently atop the folder, and says quietly, "These are the real headlines now." Then she turns and walks out, letting the door click shut behind her. Behind the glass, she imagines Caldwell's eyes widening his coffee cup, rattling against the saucer. From there, she hurries to the law department on the top floor. 5 minutes before their morning meeting, she slips in and emails the safetyalerts.zip to every major pharma litigation attorney she could find. New York firms, Washington, D.C. lobbyists, even a renowned whistleblower watchdog group. The subject line reads, "Urgent evidence of suppressed clinical data." She knows the legal wheels will turn fast. Lawsuits will follow. By 8:00 a.m., the first news alerts break. Whittaker whistleblower exposes $1.2 billion profit from deadly drug markups. Her phone buzzes non-stop. She stands in the lobby, calm, amid the chaos of suited employees rushing to screens. She breathes deeply, savoring the moment. But she isn't finished. At 9:00 a.m., she boards a live news satellite truck parked outside the headquarters. A local reporter recognizes her and invites her inside for an immediate interview. Microphone in hand, Aisha looks into the camera, hands steady. "I'm Dr. Aisha Thompson. I saved lives as a nurse, then watched patients die when they couldn't afford medication. I refuse to stand by while a corporation prioritizes profits over people." Live feed goes global within minutes. Meanwhile, inside the boardroom, Colin Whittaker scrambles to convene an emergency session. Security guards fan out trying to locate the leak. IT teams isolate anomalous logins, but their measures come too late. The data is everywhere. Share prices slump. Investors call emergency hotlines. Advocacy groups flood social media with Aisha's interview. By late morning, Aisha kneels in her grandmother's old garden behind her apartment, tending to wilted herbs, basil, mint, rosemary, whispering a prayer for those who suffered. Her phone chimes. The White House National Security Council requests a briefing. The WHO issues a statement praising her courage, and dozens of hospitals offer her consultant roles. She types back, "Thank you. Let's talk this afternoon." At 1:30 p.m., she enters the Whitaker press room. Rows of journalists swivel to face her. Behind a podium stands a single microphone. A cluster of camera's lenses glare like watchful eyes. She clears her throat and begins. "Today I stand for every patient who ever skipped a dose, every family forced into bankruptcy, every nurse silenced by budget cuts. You cannot auction human life." The words feel heavy, yet liberating as they roll off her tongue. Then she pulls out a single sheet of paper, a list of names, faces, ages, victims of the Cardiolex price hike. She reads them aloud. Maria Lopez, 62. Julio Sanchez, 48. Thomas Carter, 73. As she speaks, the room hushes. Tears form in the corner of her eyes. She holds the last name, chokes slightly, then continues. "These are not numbers. They are people, and their lives matter more than your profit margins." At 2:15 p.m., the Senate Health Committee hearing begins. Aisha sits at the witness table flanked by legal counsel and Marcus Lee, who offers her a reassuring nod. Senator Ramirez leans forward. "Dr. Thompson, is this whistleblower data authentic?" She slides the pricing scandal.zip onto the dais computer. "I have seen every line of these emails. I stand by their authenticity." She watches as subcommittee members exchange solemn glances. By 4:00 p.m., the committee votes to subpoena Colin Whitaker and launch an independent investigation. Cameras flash. Reporters scramble for sound bites. Aisha steps out into the corridor. A wave of relief washes over her. At last, justice is in motion. As dusk falls, she returns to St. Mary's Emergency to check on her old colleagues. She finds the break room cleared of out for lunch signs. A new bulletin board reads, "Union meeting tomorrow, stand together." Nurses crowd around her, some with tears, others offering hugs. Aisha smiles, throat tight. "This is just the beginning," she tells them. The room bursts into applause, but she waves them quiet. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we fight on." Later, alone in the quiet of her apartment, Aisha retrieves the black card James Whitaker gave her. She stares at it, impervious now to its gleam. She tucks it into a drawer labeled Memories. Outside, the city hums with renewed hope. Press releases, policy hearings, grassroots campaigns, all sparked by one nurse's refusal to be silent. And in the calm, after the storm, Aisha closes her eyes and breathes. The battle was brutal, but the revolution has only just begun. The fallout was immediate and seismic. Within hours, Whitaker Pharmaceuticals' stock plunged by 23% as investors scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Headlines blazed across every major network. Nurse unmasks drug giant whistleblower, sparks federal probe, lives versus profits. Who wins emergency rooms in Little Rock reported a surge of patients and families empowered to demand fair pricing, chanting Aisha's name in solidarity. Inside corporate offices, panic reigned. Colin Whitaker was summoned before the Senate committee, his reputation in tatters. Board members resigned under a wrath of public pressure. The CFO was placed on administrative leave pending an independent audit. Legal teams scrambled to contain the damage, but every document Aisha leaked had already been archived and reposted by thousands of advocacy groups. Across the country, patient advocacy organizations mobilized. Grassroots campaigns crowdfunded emergency insulin supplies and heart failure medications at cost. Governors announced bipartisan investigations. State legislatures drafted bills to cap essential drug markups. On social media, Jachor patients' overprofits trended for days. Aisha's livestream interview was replayed millions of times, and thousands of messages flooded her inbox, from single mothers choosing between rent and medicine to veterans grateful for a voice they'd never had. At St. Mary's Emergency, the break room bulletin board transformed into a mural of hope, photos of Aisha kneeling beside Marcus Lee, clippings of her testimony letters of gratitude from patients she'd never met. Colleagues once worn down by endless overtime and despair stood taller. Union representatives credited her actions with securing a renewed budget and hazard pay for frontline staff. The hospital's CEO personally invited her to join a committee redesigning statewide healthcare policy. Internationally, health organizations praised her courage. The World Health Organization cited her case in a global report on pharmaceutical ethics. In London and Berlin, medical journals ran editorials celebrating the power of individual action against corporate greed. A humanitarian award followed a humbled Aisha accepted it by video call, dedicating it to every nurse, every patient, every person who refused to stay silent. Back in Little Rock, Marcus Lee opened his own scholarship fund in her name, pledging to support young people from underserved communities. In the Whitaker family mansion, James Whitaker resigned in protest of his father's tactics and joined a nonprofit board dedicated to transparent drug pricing. Even Colin, now under indictment, left a public apology video imploring reform, though few believed his words. For Aisha, the true victory wasn't in boardroom upheavals or policy reforms. It was in the faces of those she saved and inspired. She returned to the ER one morning greeted by patients who waved and whispered, "Thank you, Dr. Thompson." Her heart swelled. This was the impact she had fought for. Though the battle had been brutal, the echoes of her stand promised a healthier, fairer future for countless lives. And as she hung her white coat in the locker, she knew the ripple she'd created would outlast any corporate empire. Thank you for witnessing Aisha Thompson's fight for justice, and remember, her story isn't unique. Across the country, countless nurses, patients, and families are still caught in the crossfire of profit-driven healthcare. If you believe no one should ever have to choose between medicine and survival, make your voice heard today. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell to stand with people like Aisha in their battles against injustice. Like this video if you refuse to let corporate greed dictate who lives and who dies. Share this story with everyone you know to amplify the call for change, because real reform starts when we refuse to stay silent. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you faced the same choice Aisha did? Have you ever challenged a broken system? We want to hear your experiences and your ideas for making healthcare fair for all. Stay tuned for our next video, where we dive into another hero who dared to stand up when the odds were stacked against them. Until then, remember, one person's courage can ignite a revolution. Be that spark.